I I am I want to say honored, but honored is not the right word. And if it is the right word, maybe I'm only a little uncomfortable with it. But I'm honored to be able to do my work, what I came here to this earth to do. And so I'm about to share with you information that is unheard of insights into truth. This information will obviously be scrutinized beyond anything imaginable. Since it is as rare as it is, it's also controversial. But I'm also going to tell you it's not controversial. It shouldn't be held to be controversial information because it's actually information that needs to get out there, whether you share this information or not. And ultimately, it maybe doesn't need to get out everywhere. Maybe it needs to get to where it needs to get to. And it is. It is. So then I'm happy. Um, the the conflicts we're having right now in this country and the world are guaranteed to be a fact, and it won't be me that started any of the conflicts, and whatever I have to do with these conflicts will be only in doing my job, and my job would be to interpreting the feelings and emotions that come to us in a communication from God, and ultimately to, in my own interpretation, interpret them for you. So what I want to share with, what makes my job so important, is that I believe that the insights that I'm sharing and giving you are unheard of. They're insights that just won't be had anywhere in the world from anyone, probably me. So it makes me feel special. It makes me feel like I have a purpose, with a purpose, a reason to exist. It gives me my reason to exist. So I like it. Um, Now, the truth is hard to handle, and um, it's not only hard to handle, but it's disturbing in many ways. The truth is very disturbing. Now, the fact that the world doesn't have the information it needs to be aware of is just because people withhold information and they don't share it. Also, they don't know it. It's more likely that all this information I'm about to share with you is not known. Certainly, I'm pretty sure what I'm being told is I'm the one to deliver it to the world, and it gives me my little reason to think I'm important, and I do need a reason to be important. It's important to me that I feel important, that I'm doing something important, and God tells me that I am. So I want to feel it too. I have an ego. I do have an ego, and I try to make it behave, and that's a different story. Um, so the the condition of the world's in right now is a potential conflict, and we're having a potential conflict. You know, the balloons being shot down that are coming from wherever they're coming from, shooting down, protecting our airspace. Uh, we when information comes in to you, it's important to get a hold of the information and then have it, and not necessarily to hold it from the world, because it may be that some of the information you're holding from the world is going to cause the conflict in the world. In fact, and also it may be that maybe that's just already granted, meaning that the conflict will happen and will out to happen because we're not going to share all the information. So I won't share information I'm not supposed to share with you. I'm only going to share information that needs to be shared, whether you share it or not, and you can decide to share it or not, and it's up to you, because it's not my information that I'm giving you. It's information from God, and so I'm just going to feel happy and important that I can be a part of the whole reality. Um, so there is what's called a divine feminine collective, and it's a collective of women that are left from a goddess Minerva, also mostly Minerva, who was a mixture of Mars and not her father. And so there is a collective, a divine feminine collective, which exists as a whole in the feelings of women as an emotional truth, a spiritual unit of capacity, which is holding a feeling of all the women at once or on the collective. And so women as a whole have a feeling that they all feel as a group. And there are different collectives of women, but there's only one divine feminine collective of women, and it's mixed with both a version of Minerva, an ancient goddess of Rome and Greece, It's also mixed with Mary, the current mother of Christ, who's here today. As she's in that group, but she's not Minerva, which means that Mary would be likened to a mother who's a spiritual entity, which is a loving mother who's in the group of the divine feminine, which is Minerva, the loving daughter, but she's not loving. She's ultimately more hating. And so I don't want to say that Minerva's a hater. She certainly is a hater, and she will hate you. And she ultimately will love you too and can love you. And so I'm not going to call her a hater. What I'm going to say is that Mary, it's important to say what I'm saying the way I'm saying it without offense to anyone, especially the divine feminine or Minerva herself, giving full due respect. And I'm going to talk less highly about Minerva, only in so much as it's important to do it, because you have to know the difference between Mary, who's the mother, and Minerva, who's the daughter, and they're both in the divine feminine group, or the collective. You or they are not aware of the truth, and you do not have the right information at this time, and I'm about to help you understand it and so you receive this information now. And I want you to know how important this information I'm about to tell you is and share with you, is that because you do not have it, you are not able to fix yourself. As a collective of women in this world, you are not only not allowed to, meaning not that you're forbidden to fix yourself or have a solution, but that you do not have a way to fix yourself or a solution because of the lack of information that you don't have. And you will not get it from a library or a book. In fact, it will come from nowhere else but me. It's also why I feel important and why I'm doing what I'm doing. I believe it's my job to share this information, and I'm doing it for God. As a result of my relationship to God is only a recent one, and I haven't had a relationship to God my whole life. In fact, I wanted one really bad, and I was really mad at God that I couldn't have one. In fact, I didn't hate him, but I was very disturbed at the fact that I was trying to find God my whole life and I couldn't find him, and I was utterly disturbed about it. I wouldn't know that truth, that I was utterly disturbed about it, until I started to actually act it out and carry it out, my anger and resentment towards God, because I wanted a relationship with him. I wanted to be part of this world and part of God, and I wanted God to be a part of me and also with me too. And ultimately, I felt like I couldn't find him my whole life. So I felt like I failed, or he hates me, or he's dead, or probably I'd be more happy if he was dead than if he's actually just ignoring me, and I wouldn't be more happy if he's dead. Understand that I just was shocked at the idea that if he is dead, that's a good reason why he won't talk to me. But if he's not dead, why won't he talk to me? And so I was very uncomfortable with the idea that he might be alive if he's not going to talk to me, if I can't even get any kind of indication from that there even is a God. When I started talking to God, well, it was more like he started talking to me. And it was only in the last year or so that I've even could claim that I ever talked to God, because I would tell you my whole entire life, I never could talk to God, and I always wanted to desperately. And I was very disturbed about it and hurt. When he did talk to me, I certainly was. Well, it's a long story, which I won't tell you all about it, because I'm not here to tell you how I started talking to God. It's more like I want to let you know that it's only been a short time that I could even say it. So what does he share with me about this information I'm about to share with you? What's so important about it is that without this information, the world could not heal itself. And I'm claiming this. What I'm only saying is, give me the benefit of the doubt here, that if this man is so important, that he's going to relay such important information, which is so crucial to be had by the world in whatever way it gets out there, as long as it gets out there somehow, and through some channels that are proper, or however you do it. I'm not going to have a part in needing to tell you how to do it, other than it needs to get done somehow. And it will give the women of this world a chance to fix themselves. And first of all, we have to have an understanding of what's going on. So I'm going to try to. This is a really long story, and I'm going to try to make this in under an hour. And I'll try to just stay on point, tell you just what you need to know about. So won't be able to explain in detail a lot of the things that I'd like to. It's more like I'm going to try to cover a wide area, which would take me 10 hours to tell you about. I'm going to try to do it in under an hour. So I apologize if a lot of the information is vague. It's just that I'm trying to cover a huge field in a small, narrow amount of it. Um, so the women in this world, or the divine feminine collective, is mixed with what is called Mary, the mother goddess, or the mother of Christ. She's an entity, which is a loving mother who is loving. And she doesn't worry about fighting God, and she's not interested in hating God. She's more interested in not hating God, even if she did hate God. She's more interested in not focusing on the hate. So she's more interested in not focusing on the hate. Even if it was hate, she doesn't have it because she doesn't want it, even if it is true or warranted or real. So what I want to suggest to you is that the divine feminine collective is mixed with the Mary, the mother of Christ entity, and also Minerva, or the mixed daughter, which would be more of a, she could be a mother, but she's more of a daughter, and her behavior will reflect more of a daughter who's mad at her dad and resents him and hates him and ultimately blames him for everything, including her destruction. So understand that I want to start by talking about what the divine feminine collective is as compared to Minerva herself, and what what it has become, the divine feminine collective, as compared to when Minerva had it 3,000 years ago before Christ was born. So Minerva is an older entity that's been here since way before Christ ever was, and so is older than Christ and is just as valid as Christ. She will think so, and so I'll refer to that collective, or this collective, as Minerva, not Mary, and Mary's mixed in with it, but Mary will be the mother in it, and Minerva will be more like the daughter who could be a mother in it. Um, the The divine feminine, Minerva, goddess, had a goddess body 3,000 years ago. And she was a god. And now, if she is still alive, she's playing dead and wants me to think she's dead. But she's not dead, because understand she survives in the collective, what's left of it. So understand, if let's say that the goddess Minerva was destroyed or killed for any reason, that the goddess died, literally, she was in a goddess head body that was a goddess body that was not mortal. It was actually immortal, and it was heading the divine feminine collective of all the women in the world, perhaps, or some of the women, depending on. There was many goddesses, and understand Minerva was just a head goddess, or maybe the most important one to mention, because she was the most involved. Now, Mary wasn't around at all when Minerva was in the collective of women. There was no Mary. She didn't show up until 1,000 years after that, when Christ showed up. And so that Christ and Mary are two new entities that came into the world when Christ was born. Well, Mary was born before Christ, and ultimately she reflected a divine feminine that was not going to be Minerva, and wouldn't agree to be Minerva, because she wouldn't agree to hate or blame God or blame the devil or Satan or make any hatred statements or even be in conflict or disposition. Mary stays out of the disposition as her result and her reason, so her purpose. And so Mary's just a mother trying to be a mother, loving, and she doesn't want to get involved in all the hatred towards God or towards the devil or towards Satan, who are gods of this world. Now, if you look in the Bible, you're going to see that it says that the devil is, or Satan is, the god of this world. Now, he's not. If it's true that the Bible says that in any way, or this in any way, that the god of this world is Satan or the devil, if it's true, it says it in the Bible, and so then it is true. And if even if it doesn't say it in the Bible, if the devil or Satan is god of this world, well, it's a truth none of us would want to accept, and none of us then would be accepting the god in this world today, unless we were accepting Satan or the devil in this world today. And now, also, what's most important to mention now is Satanism and devil worship are not following God of this world. They're following animal instinct of a divine masculine collective in disposition and resentment against God, probably hating or being punished by God, which means that many, and I'm not claiming all the Satanists are like this. I'm claiming some of them are, and they're probably not called Satanists, but it may be that if you were to try to say Satanism or devil worshiping has anything to do with the god of this world or the devil or Satan, well, then maybe it's not true, actually. What if I told you that Satanism has nothing to do with Satan? And also it does, because Satanism in different places is behaving differently and doing worship of Satan in different ways. So many Satan worshipers are going to be not the same as other Satan worshipers. And although all Satanists are Satanists, Well, the truth is that Satanists are not all Satanists. Some of them are not Satanists, and the other ones are Satanists that aren't Satanists, and some of them are Satanists. So understand what I'm doing is, again, mixing collectives of people seeming to do the same thing, and they're not doing the same thing. Some Satanists are not worshiping the devil or God of this world or Satan. They think they are, and if they are, they're doing it for their own gain. And not all Satanists are doing it for their own gain. They may be worshiping the God of this world who claims to be Satan or the devil, and so is. And ultimately, it's confusing then. What you're going to say is, what do I think about Satanists? Well, I'll say, well, what do you think about some Satanists? What about other Satanists? Other Satanists are not some Satanists, or one Satanist is not like the other Satanists, and they're all Satanists. But the other Satanist is not the same as the one Satanist or the some Satanists. So you can't look at Satanists as all Satanists, because some of them are different from the others and very different. And you can't look at all devil worshippers as all devil worshippers, because some devil worshippers might not be like anything like other devil worshippers, and they're all devil worshippers. So understand that what a quick understanding from that is to be had is that a quick understanding to be had from that is that what we're trying to understand here is very confusing. And it is not only confusing, it's compelling to be frustratingly confounded, and in disposition, and often dispossession. So basically, the prostration of a nation, of a people, is besides the point. But ultimately, every position is a position or disposition, and we're all in different positions and dispositions. There's many of them. So we can't look at Satanists as all the same, and we have to know that some are different. Some are valid and some are invalid utterly. We can't look at devil worshippers as all the same, because some devil worshippers are utterly invalid, and other ones are very valid, depending on who they are and what they're doing. And so if Satan or the devil was God of this world, and ultimately not the God of that heaven, well, they wouldn't claim to be God of that heaven where Jehovah rules and or Jesus rules up there in that place. And they wouldn't claim that place. They're not. They would say that we're not gods of that world or that heaven, or we're not gods of that domain, which is not this domain, and this domain is our domain, and we are gods of this domain. This world is mine, says Satan. This world is my world, says the devil. And ultimately, I'm not claiming that heaven up there. I have nothing to do with that place. This is my place. It's here in this world, and it's mine. So ultimately, they would claim it. So understand. Forgive me if I'm showing you an example of how to understand it, being very plain, blunt, bold, and upfront, without holding anything back. It's to give you the best understanding you could possibly get as quick as possible. If we are to be a nation or a people of people that do not truly know who God is, or if we truly feel who God is, and we truly feel frustration for our lack of understanding of who he truly is, or the fact that it's the same frustration, even if we have some understanding of who he truly is, because whoever truly is God is going to be understood by each of us differently, and each of us will know different things about it, and also share or not share information about it, which means that our idea of God, and each one of us in different groups, will be different, and absolutely very different. In fact, so different that we'll all say we're following God, and in fact, only some of us might be, and others might think we are, but we're not. And it's important to know that many of us are not following God, that think we're following God. And many of us that want to follow God would refuse to follow God. If Satan and the devil were gods of this world, they wouldn't want to follow them. And so understand, I want to start by talking about Christ and what he had to say. First of all, before I say anything about Christ and what he had to say, understand that Christ came after 1,000 years after Minerva, 1,000 years after Apollo, the god of the sun, 1,000 years after Zeus, all these other gods and goddesses. So Christ came after. He's new, and Mary's new. The presence of Mary in the Catholic Church is a mother-loving goddess kind of energy. She's a mother, maybe not a goddess, but ultimately the mother of Christ to be recognized as. And so is, in a sense, a divine feminine spirit. Maybe we won't call her goddess, because she's not to be called goddess. If you ask God, she's not a goddess. She's the same thing as a goddess, but she's no longer allowed to be a goddess, as a goddess, quote unquote, is. A goddess in a goddess body, heading a divine feminine collective, as a goddess that's alive in a goddess body, there is no goddess body heading any collective today. What's left of the goddess body is in what's called a divine feminine collective, and it's ultimately in humans. And the humans so have the goddess through what's called the human collective, and it's only resulting in humans. Now, humans are then who Minerva. She is alive, and she's still alive, and she has been alive for 3,000 years. She's not dead in the sense that if she's hiding and wants us to think she's dead, she's certainly not allowed to lead the goddess head anymore. And if she is allowed, she's doing it in secret without our knowledge, which means that then I don't know about it. I'll tell you that what God would say, and what he told me was that, well, if she is leading it, that's what she'd like to think. She's leading it in secret, but I took it away from her, and she doesn't. In fact, she's dead because I killed her. So ultimately, God would say he killed off his daughter, who was not only misbehaving, and that's a whole long story. But understand, as disturbing as this all is, I say all this with absolute due respect to the goddess and goddesses, and whatever's left of them, and the divine human female collective, which may not be divine anymore, other than it's all that's left of the divine. So in a sense, it's divine, but it's not divine because it's only humans now, and there is no goddess head. So, so if there is a goddess head, it's being run by the humans, not the goddess herself anymore, since she's not here. And like I said again, if she's in hiding and it wants us to think she's not here, well, then that's what I've been led to believe, because God told me she's not here. If she is here, she's here only in the humans. So Christ would have said, pray for your enemies, and love your enemy as yourself. Pray for your enemies as yourself. Now, who's he speaking of in the sense that people are allowed to defy Satan, their enemy and their adversary, and people are allowed to defy the devil because they're not devil worshippers, or they would never be that bad or this bad. And so basically, if Christ was to tell you, love your enemy as yourself, pray for your enemy, and be kind to others as yourself, and don't hate on your enemy. Ultimately, if Christ said that, it would have been something 1,000 years later that was relevant. And it was that you are supposed to love your enemy and pray for your enemy as yourself. And you're supposed to treat each other as each other. And often we are enemies to each other. And even when we don't want to be, we certainly seem to be. And so that's why the world will fight in conflict against itself, against each other, as itself, and as each other. It is a problem, and a huge problem. And we're going through it right now in the world. It's not my problem, and I didn't create it. It's ultimately, I'm only bringing it up as it is my problem, in the sense that I might be a part of it, but so are you. So you're just as much to blame as I am, and I'm not blaming you. I'm trying to take the blame off of you. Christ would have told you to love your enemies because he wanted you to love Satan and the devil. Now, he didn't say that, but I'm interpreting that information based upon my own reasoning, and it's my opinion. Absolutely. It's also what God told me, because I was told that the God of this world is who he is, and so don't say he's not. And ultimately, whoever he is, it is God of this world. So if Satan and the devil could say, well, we are God of this world, then, well, you wouldn't have to acknowledge that. You could say it's not true. In fact, you could resist it and go against it and say, how dare you claim to be anything that you're not? My enemy is what you are. And then they would remind you, aren't you supposed to love your enemies? Isn't that what Christ said? And ultimately, they would say, no. We don't have to love you, devil or Satan. We only have to love our other enemies. Our other enemies? Well, we're the only enemies you're going to love or not, and ultimately pray for. And so basically, they would claim you don't have any enemies but us. And so we would be the enemies you love or not, or pray for or not. And ultimately, if you don't pray for us, then you're not praying for your enemies. And if you say that you could pray for your enemies but not us, then we're going to say, well, we are your enemies. Who else are you praying for? And so it would be a frustrating acknowledgement. It'd be a frustrating acknowledgement to have to acknowledge a lot of this information and understand what the problem is with the dogma we have, or what they call the religious dogma, which I won't say has to be called religious dogma. It's just the way I disagree with it. But I'm not saying I disagree with it. It certainly is an opinion that could be called dogma, but maybe it's not dogma. Maybe it's actually actually qualified religion, and it's an actual belief that's valid. And so I'm not counting down or taking away from any religion. In fact, all religions belong here where they're at. They're supposed to be here. In fact, none of them are wrong. In fact, they're all right in their own ways, doing their own thing. And ultimately, even if it's another thing they're doing, it certainly is. There certainly is no reason to attack any religion or say it's wrong when it's not. It's certainly doing what it believes, it's doing what it wants, and it's doing what it's told, and it thinks it's been told by God. And so ultimately, it may be the fact that God is telling them to be and do what they are. And so it's not wrong. And I'm not saying that it is. I'm saying that it's right. So there is nothing I'm going against here, because my understanding says there is no enemy unless you want to make yourself your enemy, and you can be your worst enemy. And ultimately, if you are your worst enemy, then it'll be a fact. And it's better to be your worst own enemy to yourself and punish yourself than to do it to other people. It's better to just punish yourself, and we could be our own enemies to ourselves. Ultimately, that's what has happened to us, is that those people who want to some degree honor some truth about truth have to become enemies to themselves when they don't know who their enemy is. And ultimately, you're not your own enemy, and you're your worst own enemy. And how are you going to deliver it to you? How's it going to be delivered to you? It will be however it is, and it will be carried out and played out in this world as it is played out. The conflicts, the wars, the problems. So so the Divine Feminine Collective that went against the head of the father of the gods, Zeus, was in Minerva, and she was called a vixen daughter, and he threatened to kill his own daughter many times. He threatened to kill his wife, and ultimately Hera was the queen of the gods, and she was the the queen of, well, some gods, yeah, and ultimately she was a goddess head of goddesses. So she was the goddess mother of all the goddesses, and the head, the wife of Zeus, maybe a sister too. And Zeus was not approving of his daughter during the Trojan conflict, and became to be against his own wife and daughter, and eventually destroyed him, is what I'll tell you. But they weren't utterly destroyed, because they lived on in the collective of humans, which had them and still have them. And now Mother Mary would be added in there with Jesus 1,000 years after that, or sometime in 700-800 after that, whenever Jesus was born, and as compared to whenever Troy was here. I don't really know the time period. It could have been anywhere from 700 to 1,000 years afterwards, after Troy. And the important thing to know about it is that the goddess heads were destroyed, and so were some of the god heads, especially the gods that were with the goddesses were destroyed. So lots of gods were killed, and ultimately maybe all the goddesses were killed, unless they're hiding somewhere, like in Nyx or something. Nyx could be a goddess that's still alive in some other universe, and there could be lots of goddesses that are alive in some other universe. They don't want to have nothing to do with Earth or this realm, so they're not in this realm. So any goddesses that are alive still, that may be true, but they're not in this realm. They're not allowed in this realm. And this realm would be one God world, and ultimately God is the one God we have, is the only God that is. And he'd say, you can call me Jehovah. If I used to be Zeus, we can argue about that. Many will want to argue about it, but it really don't matter if I used to be called Zeus and now I'm called Jehovah, because I'm more loving after I abandoned Earth and gave it to my two sons to rule over. After I punished and threw down all the bad sons of mine, the devil and Satan, my two bad sons, which I threw down here to cast them down to Earth so they could be rulers over their third of their angels, which were also cast down because they were against me. Ultimately, if Jehovah abandoned this world, and he gave it to his two sons, you could also understand it as he threw Satan down here with a third of his angels in hell. And here we are, and we're still here. So the truth of the matter is, how do you interpret or scrutinize truth when it's so hard to actually perceive? If you're confounded, you won't understand anything I'm saying right now, because it'll all seem like nonsense. Because if you're confounded, he's not going to allow you to understand any of this, which means if you do understand me, any of what I'm saying, it's because you're allowed to, and he wants you to. That's why you do. And I expect then many people will disagree with me. So I say, if you think this is nonsense and what I'm talking about, I first of all want to sincerely apologize to you, and also say that the only reason why I would owe you a sincere apology is that if you're confounded by God or the devil or Satan, and that means you won't understand because he won't allow you to reason any of this, then it'll be scrutinized in a negative way. And I'm already aware that many of you will think I'm full of it, and I couldn't possibly be true. It's because you're confounded. You're not allowed to understand, and it's part of what he wants. And he doesn't want everyone to get to understand. He wants many of them not to be able to, and he'll make it so they can't. So he confounds you so that you can't figure out anything and have any clue. It's what he wants. And if he's not confounding you, then you'll actually understand what I'm saying, and then you'll actually agree with it. So consider the fact you could understand me right now with the fact that you're allowed to. And if you don't understand me or can't make sense of this, maybe he's trying to confound you. So I would suggest you still try to make sense of it, knowing you're being confounded. And also realize that if maybe that it's just hard to understand and you're not being confounded. And that means that maybe if it's difficult to understand all this or take it in, it is. So it means that don't assume you're being confounded. If you're not, then maybe it's just hard to understand. It's really hard to grab. It certainly is contradictory and hypocritical in every way. Everything I'm going to tell you now is hypocritical. At least it certainly doesn't stand up as its own piece of evidence. It certainly is only standing up as some scrutinizable, maybe piece of nonsense, non-evidence. I'm expecting that kind of reflective response, and ultimately, I'm also told that it'll be minimized, hopefully, because of the fact the world wants to change rather than just keep dying and being killed off. So wow, man, oh man, wow, man, oh man, wow, man, oh man. Um, the the punishment of Earth and what we're being punished for and why we're here, it has to do everything to do with what's called a karmic wheel and reincarnation. Reincarnation is a punishment over and over, being killed by God and or by the devil or Satan, being destroyed for each lifetime you come into this earth. That you want to fight God, or that's what Satan and the devil will tell you. You want to fight God, you're going to fight me, and I didn't want to fight you, but you want to fight me, and ultimately you're fighting God. Then you're fighting the God of this world. Maybe you're not fighting Jesus up in that heaven, or maybe you're not fighting Jehovah up in that heaven, but that heaven's not this world, and it's not mine. I'm not claiming that, so I'm claiming that this is my world, and don't think it's not. And don't think I'm not God of it. I certainly am only supreme God over it, me and my brother. So if the devil and Satan could be considered two different things, they're also the same thing, because the devil is a singularity that's masculine only, and Satan is a mix of masculine and feminine, and they are the same entity. The thing is where the devil has the woman or the feminine, it's not the devil. It's because the devil doesn't have her. So where Satan is going to be not having the feminine, it's called the devil. And where devil has the feminine, it's called Satan. Because Satan and the devil are two different words to be understood, two different gods to know, two different brothers, and they both claim to be God of this world, and they absolutely demand that they are, and they won't argue about it. They say that we're being punished in what's called a karmic reincarnation wheel, and this means that we'll be why we're here. The reason why we're here and we've been thrown down here is because either we're 1/3 of the angels that got thrown down with Satan, or we're any minions that came from them and their descendants, which means that not all of us are angels that descended here. Only a select 1/3 are, but then those 1/3 of the angels had descendants, and ultimately, if they're not spawned from a physical bloodline, they're spawned from a spiritual bloodline, which is just as real, which means that you can't really want to argue about the fact that if there's a spiritual bloodline of angels that's here or not, or what is it, or it's not here and you know it. Well, it's here in spirit, if it's not here in flesh and bloodline. But if it's here in flesh and bloodline and spirit, it's only more powerful and still here. So it's not important to argue about all this. It's important to know it and be aware that none of this is to be had an argument with or to be opposed. It's more like just offensive, and anyone who just utterly won't agree with it because they utterly hate God and they're not going to listen to him. Well, they're not hating on Jehovah and Jesus. They love Jehovah and Jesus, and they are listening to him. The problem is when God, Jehovah, abandoned this world and left it to his two sons to be cursed in it and thrown down. Well, he also let him rule over it as God, because they are the only leading angels that were here, the most powerful ones, the only ones that were as powerful as they were. Satan himself, the devil himself, they were the leading angels that got thrown into hell or thrown down on earth to rule over it as gods, or say that they got thrown out of heaven because they can't be in heaven anymore. They're not allowed. Ultimately, they'll say that we're not allowed in heaven. That's fine, but up there, but that's not fine down here, depending on whether that's recognizing me or not. And if it's recognizing me, then not, that's fine. But if that will not recognize me, then I don't consider that okay. So ultimately, they're going to be demanding gods that say they are. So why would we be being punished here on earth? Well, because all of us are going against God. We're not going against Jehovah. We're not going against Jesus, and we may be actually. So some of us that are here on earth being punished on a karmic wheel, we're getting reincarnated. Understand, we're getting born over and over again to learn over and over again, to be erased over and over again, to have to learn all and over again, to die over and over again, to be born and over again, to be killed by Satan and the devil over and over again, murdered over and over again by devil and Satan, and then we're born again to get to do something again. What are we here to do? If is it just straight up punishment? Well, the idea is no, it's not. It's not straight up punishment, because it's actually just something that will go on forever as a punishment, and it will never be solved or resolved or have a solution, because ultimately, unless someone like me could get this information to the world and then you share it, or at least in the channels it needs to be shared and understand, I'll tell you that everybody needs to know what I'm sharing here. And although that people will censor this information and utterly not share it, or maybe selectively share it, I'll be happy with whatever I get, because God will be happy with whatever he gets. And ultimately, he says, if you don't have this information and the world doesn't, it'll only make y'all suffer worse. And if you do have this information and you share it with the world, it'll actually make you not suffer worse. All won't punish you so much or so badly. So ultimately, I'm punishing you because not only will you not share and you censor this information, but you also make it hard so people can't have it. And you don't want it to get out. And ultimately, you need to want to let it get out, because ultimately everyone needs to know it. That way we could all have a solution. The solution is not going to happen. And understand that your feelings and what you know as you feel it is a conviction that is going to absolutely be aware that what I'm saying is not true and it can't be, and you feel strongly against it. And you're not wrong in the sense that you're feeling the right feeling from the Divine Feminine Collective, who's leading this world as a goddess, or what's left of a goddess. And she's not allowed to be a goddess anymore. She's enslaved, and she's been enslaved by Satan and the god of this world, who's the devil, and ultimately claims to be, and says, yes, I did enslave her, and she'll never get free again until she becomes a happy slave of mine. And I want her to be a happy, genuine slave of mine. I'll still not give her anything, maybe for lifetime after lifetime. Maybe after 100 lifetimes, she's a happy slave of mine and shows me she's genuine. Maybe then I'll give her something back, like her goddess head. And I don't think I will, though, for thousands of years, because I'm telling you, I won't give it back to her. She lost it. She's not getting it back, and there's no plans to give it back to her. And now let's talk about